week, I was so excited when Bryony Gordon's name came up as a possible interviewee when I was sitting in, and she is opposite me now. This woman is a columnist, best-selling author, cold water swimmer, and multiple marathon runner. There is very little our next guest cannot do. Her hotly anticipated memoir, Mad Woman, is out today, and it might just be not only her most powerful yet, but one of the most important books I've read for a very, very long time. So please welcome the always brilliant, very brainy Bryony Gordon!
Oh wow, that's I'm tearing up.
Seriously, Bryony, I don't want to make you embarrassed, but this is like a Bible for the brain.
Oh, thank you.
This book.
That's me. Do you know what? I wrote it in such, it was like written out of such darkness and
Yes.
in such sort of, such lack of self-esteem and self-belief. So, this, like when I hear you say that and people say, oh, I recognize myself in that, it's like, it just makes me feel less alone.
You are. I mean, this is the thing with your book, because I'll start just like going through it. I mean, I've read it from front to back, and I've made several notes.
You've highlighted. I mean, I'm so impressed. You've got like this is like it's like a GCSE English textbook. Do you remember when we had to do all the notes?
Yes, it's like this is how much I loved it. You've started off going right into like OCD and describing what that feels like in your brain, and there was so many points. You're talking about it being a vicious illness. Talk to me about a little bit about OCD and when you sort of like understood what it was.
So OCD, so everyone listening will have heard someone say, and may even said themselves, oh, I'm a bit OCD. And they'll say like, you should see my sock drawer. And I always go, oh no, don't say the sock drawer. My husband always jokes, I wish you had the good type of OCD, meaning like the clean type, because I am so disorganized. But of course there is no good type of OCD. It's a disorder. So I describe it as like your brain refusing to acknowledge what your eyes can see, so that your hands are clean or the oven is off. And I have a type since I was about 12 or 13 that was all about intrusive thoughts. So
Yes.
we all have intrusive thoughts. We all have thousands of thoughts a day, and we're not our thoughts. So we've all had that thought, like someone hands us their baby at a party and we're like, what if I just threw the baby on the floor?
Yeah.
I always say that, and I hope that other people have had that thought. But we kind of, you just go, no, that's obviously, I'm not going to do that. And you dismiss it. But someone with OCD will become really distressed by the thought and ruminate on the thought to check they are not the thought. So I had, from quite a young age, all of these intrusive thoughts about that I was like a serial killer and I might have blanked it out in horror or hurt a child.
Yeah.
And, that OCD is absolutely utterly debilitating. And it shaped my life from like 11 or 12 all the way. And it still continues to, And so I've always wanted to write about the reality of OCD, because I'm sure there'll be someone listening right now who goes, oh my God, that's what I've got. I'm not a bad person.
The thing with it though, Bryony, is like, I think we all have that inner critic in our brains. And I think so even people who do not have OCD can identify with this thing that goes on in our heads that tells us we're not enough and when I was reading this book, and it's not just, it doesn't just feature, you go through everything. You touch on menopause, you touch on binge eating, you go into addiction. And I mean, it really does go into those places that other people, there's so many influencers these days, and there's so many people say, just, think positively. And it's like, it drives me insane, because you can't think your way out of a sick brain.
No.
And I think that's what's good about this book, is you're a truth teller.
Oh, thanks.
How hard was it for you to actually be that honest in it?
Well, it's weird. It's not hard for me to write this stuff down. I don't know why. For whatever reason, I don't have any shame writing about this stuff that gives most of us shame. I've learned that shame dies when you expose it to the light.
Definitely.
And so I feel okay writing about binge eating disorder, my experiences of alcoholism and addiction and OCD, and all of these things are so interlinked,
Of course.
And if we don't talk about them, they snowball and they get bigger.
Yes.
So I don't find it hard to write about it. I suppose I do. It does bring it all up again, And I suppose when I write it, I don't write while I'm unwell, if that makes sense.
It completely makes sense.
I wait till I'm kind of through to the other side. But
so
also the thing is, my thing about writing all of these books, and is that every book I've ever written is like, I want I feel like I write about the things that make me feel bad about themselves in myself, in the hope that it'll make other people feel good about themselves, because I hate the idea of people going through what I've been through and feeling so alone, because that's what all mental health issues have in common. They work by isolating you, by telling you you're a freak, by telling you that you're alone, by telling you that no one's going to understand what you're going through. And that is just not true. Like, if someone's listening right now and is in a depression, thinks they have OCD, is struggling with alcohol, like, not only is there someone out there who understands what you're going through, there's someone out there going through what you're going through. And the first line of recovery and the first entrance into recovery is like finding your community of people. So for me, writing a book like Madwoman is like, I say, hi, have you had this thing? Should we all come and hang around this book and congregate and realise we're not freaks, together, instead of like being at home thinking, oh my God, I'm the weirdest person in the world.
Yeah. Bryony, I mean, we've just been discussing, our own personal journeys, because it touches on so much of my life in this, because I'm a recovering addict too, and I'm in recovery and I've been 15 years clean.
Well done.
I know, it's amazing. How clean are you?
Nearly 7 years.
It's amazing. I mean, look at this. I mean, this is like a miracle that we're actually living and doing this, and we got through that. But there's one of these brilliant things in your book. I love that, you dive deep and you go in and you describe all of these things. But I love this section called Evidence You're a Miracle, where you just say the day you were born is considered by the majority of doctors to be one of the most dangerous of your life, and you have survived it. You've gone on to survive every day since. And if you're like me, which I imagine you are because you've got this book, that is some kind of miracle in itself. And I love that you put that in.
Yes.
Because we forget what we are doing here.
Yeah. And also, like, it's not even that. It's like the stuff before we even get to being born, like the way, I mean, like, I'm not going to give all the listeners of Virgin Radio a biology lesson, but like, the sperm having to get to the egg, it has to go through like a lot, like it has to go through like the sperm equivalent of an Iron Man uphill, and then when it gets to the egg is surrounded by white blood cells that act like nightclub bouncers, like you ain't coming in. So it is all miraculous, and yet we I don't know about you, but my initial thought when I wake up is how can I get out of everything I have to do today? I'm useless. I need to hide under this duvet, And that is, you're right. We are all absolute miracles.
But the thing, I think, because we have these big brains, our big brains are like, they're programmed to just give us thoughts. And a lot of the thoughts are on the negative side. Not many people just wake up with really positive thoughts, And I think one of the brilliant things, right, you talk about addiction, you talk about not only, alcoholism, which a lot of people sort of like get and they understand, but you talk about cross addiction as well. Because, in like later stages of recovery, I've got a friend who says, if you're in less than one fellowship, you're in denial. And, you go into all of the different aspects about recovery. How important was that, writing about that for you?
So, yeah, so I think this is the other thing this book is like, we have this notion in life, we like very neat beginnings, middles and ends, And so I wrote a book about getting sober, and, it was, we like that idea of, you face your demons and you triumph over adversity, and then you go off into the sunset and live happily ever after. And of course, life isn't like that. And so for me, I was about 2.5 years sober when the pandemic hit, and I was so relieved I was sober, because I thought, oh my God, I would not get out of this if I was still drinking. But and then I realised about sort of 6 or 7 months in that I was like headfirst in another addiction, which was food, the binge eating. And that was so interesting to me, because I'd never really realised how much food is a coping mechanism. Yeah. It's like a drug. We know
what it is.
It's the first, we know it can be used as a weapon of war, like withholding it, as we see right now. But also think about it. It's the first way you learn that you have any power over your parents, right? You like say, I'm not going to eat that broccoli. And you're like, wow, but I can control them.
Bryony, it's the way that you can change the way you feel. Because if you eat some chocolate, it will give you a dopamine hit, and it'll start off that sort of like thing in your head to change the way you feel. And I think that's the thing with addiction, is when it's never about the substance or the behavior. It's always about the fact that the addict can't really sit with their feelings.
Well, this is the thing. But also with the binge eating, I get a lot of messages from women saying, I I think I have binge eating disorder,
Yeah.
which is the most common eating disorder,
Definitely.
more common than bulimia and anorexia combined, right? And but they go, I'm so ashamed because I've put on weight. And I want to say to them, this is not a weight issue. If you go, this is a soul issue. If you go into this trying to lose weight, you're just going to make it worse for you. And we do live in a society that encourages that. You waver between restricting your food and binging it. And that's because our brains and our biology is designed that if you deprive yourself of food, you know, evolutionary wise, you're gonna sort of want to eat more. So it's about, you've got to work on yourself. You've got to work on yourself as the issue. The other thing you were saying about negative thoughts and we don't wake up with positive thoughts, what I found a really helpful thing, and I don't know if this helps anyone at home, but like to realize that that's actually an evolutionary process.
You're right.
To help us survive. So negative bias. So like when we get back to the beginning of human beings on the plains of Africa, it helped to only remember the bad things because that would save your life.
Yeah, because you get eaten by a saber-toothed tiger.
Yeah, or there's, or there'll be another team. What am I talking about? Like another, like a group of people that might kill us. You know? So that is why we tend to focus on the negative things more than the positives. And just having that moment of realizing why that is helps me to step back and like get a bit of distance from it.
I mean, the thing with this, and I'm glad that you mentioned the word shame, because there's a whole section on shame in this book. And I think it's one of the things that keeps people away from getting well, because they think there's something wrong with me and nobody else gets it. And I love the fact that you've dived in there about that topic, because I remember when I first got clean and people said an addict or anybody needs shame, like a man in a desert who's dying for a drink needs a vinegar to drink, and I think it's such an important topic for human beings, because I think we are riddled with shame in this society.
We totally are. And we kind of, lots of things thrive, by shaming people.
Definitely.
Like we see this in like the media or quite often now with like that sort of, you talk about the culture wars, or, you only have to look at, news websites and see how people are just shaming each other.
On the internet.
Yeah. And it's, and shame is really toxic. Obviously I remember when I write these books, I remember someone once saying, this woman has no shame. And I was like, because I've written about these things that made me feel ashamed. And I was like, I have so much shame. Like, this is why I write these things, because I know there will be people listening who have, just chatting to you, like we're both addicts in recovery, you know? And it's like and shame dies when you expose it to the light, but shame also keeps us really sick. And you can't get better by shaming yourself either. And I think we have this kind of belief in Western society that if I'm cruel to myself, if I wake up and I'm cruel to myself and I hold myself deeply accountable for everything, then I'll get better. And it just makes us more and more ill and more ashamed of being us.
We need self-kindness, self-love and self-compassion. And this book is an act of all of those things. You are not just helping yourself with this book, Bryony. You are helping every single other person who will ever pick this up. You really need to go and get this book. Bryony Gordon, Mad Woman. It doesn't just cover the things we've been talking about. She goes into, I don't want to call you she, Bryony goes into menopause, binge eating, OCD. She also talks about, the joys of being alive. It is literally the Bible for the brain. You have to get it. Bryony, I want to be your next best friend. Can we please go out for coffee one day?
Definitely.
I love you. Thank you so much for coming in.
Thank you, Jayne.
Thank you, Bryony.
Virgin Radio.